Hi there, Terry back again. Hope I find you all well. And this is another video with comic covers. Because of the popularity of my Batman video recently, I thought I'd carry on with the same theme. So now I'm picking on my Detective Comics collection, which I have from January 1970. And the year began, or the first issue, number 395, began with the first collaboration of writer Denny O'Neil and Neal Adams, which is a smashing cover by Neal Adams with colouring by Gaspar Saladino. The first story in this book was called The Secret of the Waiting Graves, and like we said, it's written by Denny O'Neil and the art was by Neal Adams and Dick Giordino. The letterer was Ben Oda. I mentioned the letterer mainly because there was a little bit of trivia about him. They reckoned he was the letterer to go to if you had a deadline. Nothing was too much trouble for the guy. He passed away in 1984. The Robin story was called Drop Out or Drop Dead. The writer Frank Robbins and the art by Gil Kane and Murphy Anderson. And the letterer on this one was John Costanza, and the most important work he did was on Swamp Thing and The Dark Knight Returns. Another reason for mentioning the letterer. We then have number 396, February cover date. This was Batman and with Batgirl there. This cover was done by Neal Adams and Gaspar Saladino. The story inside was called The Brain Pickers, written by Frank Robbins, and the art was by Bob Brown and Joe Geller. The Batgirl story was The Orchid Crusher, and written by Frank Robbins, and the art was by Gil Kane and Murphy Anderson. Also inside this issue, despite it not looking any thicker than the last one, was an old story written by Jack Miller called The Master of Mind Over Matter. The art was by Gil Kane and John Giunta, that's the way you pronounce it, and it was from Strange Adventures number 26, November 1952. And then we have, it's another Neal Adams and Gaspar Saladino cover, issue 3397 from March, and the interior story was called Paint a Picture of Peril, written by Denny O'Neil, and the art was back with Neal Adams and Dick Giordino. The Batgirl story was The Hollow Man, written by Frank Robbins, art again by Gil Kane and Murphy Anderson, and this also guest starred Jason Bard. Then we have number 398, that's an April issue, and again Neal Adams and Gaspar Saladino. This was called, as you can see on the cover, The Poison Pen Puzzle. Again written by Frank Robbins, interior art by Bob Brown and Joe Geller, and the Robbins story was Moonstruck. Again, Frank Robbins wrote it along with Gil Kane and Vince Colletta doing the art. Trivia for this issue, Mike W. Barr appears on the letters page. So just a few years before he started writing the stories. Then we have number 399, May cover date. This is by Neal Adams and Gaspar Saladino, and this was the first appearance of Arthur Reeves. Death Comes to a Small Locked Room, written by Denny O'Neil, art by Bob Brown and Joe Geller, and the Robin story was Panic by Moonglow, written by Frank Robbins, and art again by Gil Kane and Vince Colletta. And then we have the big smash issue. It's cost me quite a few pennies. Well, actually, in fact, I think I sold about 150 comics plus a bit of money to get hold of this one. It's in reasonably decent condition. I've even put it in one of those clear backing boards because of the price. And this is another lovely cover by Neal Adams and Gaspar Saladino. And of course this is the first appearance of Kirk Langstrom as the Man-Bat. And the title, as you can see, is Challenge of the Man-Bat. Written by Frank Robbins, and the interior art was again by Neal Adams and Dick Giordino. It was also the first appearance of the Blackout Gang. They did appear a few more times, but mainly in the reprint of this story. I think there's about 7 reprints, and 2 other stories that they were in. Oh, and the Batgirl and Robin story, I should have said, was called The Burial for Batgirl, written by Denny O'Neil, art by Gil Kane and Vince Colletta. And the trivia here was, there was an Alan Brennett letter in the letter page, and he was known for writing Wonder Woman, starting with issue 231. And he also wrote a couple of the Wonder Woman TV episodes, back in the 70s. Then we have another Neal Adams, Dick Giordino and Gaspar Saladino in this case, on this cover. And this was a July cover date, obviously issue 401. And the Batman story was called Target for Tonight, written by Frank Robbins, and the pencils were by Bob Brown and the inks by Joe Geller. And the Robin and Batgirl story was Midnight is the Dying Hour by Denny O'Neil and Gil Kane and Vince Colletta. This issue's letters page had missives from Doug Moench, Alan Brennett and Martin Pasco, 3 more notable Batman writers in the future. Then we have our second appearance of Man-Bat from number 402, August cover date. Neal Adams, Gaspar Saladino covers, and obviously the second appearance of Man-Bat and the first appearance of his wife Francine Langstrom. Written by Frank Robbins, and the interior art was by Neal Adams and Vince Colletta. Robin story was My Place in the Sun, and he guest starred Roy Harper, either as Speedy or Red Arrow, and I think he's had several other names as the futures evolved. It was written by Mike Friedrich, and the art by Gil Kane and Vince Colletta. Then we have the September cover date, another Neal Adams and Gaspar Saladino cover, You Die by Morning, as Mourning, and written by Frank Robbins. Page 1 was actually drawn by Carmine Infantino, and the rest of it was by Bob Brown. The inks by Frank Giacoia, or Giacoia. The Robin story was called Breakout, and again done by the normal people, Mike Friedrich, Gil Kane and Vince Colletta. The trivia, well, the letter page again, was Mike W. Barr. His first story was in Detective 444. He wrote An Elongated Man's Tale, but he had again the letter in this issue. Another lovely Neal Adams and Gaspar Saladino cover. And this actual tale was dedicated to Joe Kubert and Robert Kanigha, for obvious reasons, going to look at the cover of them. And this was done again, this was called Ghost of the Killer Skies, as you can see there, featuring the enemy ace. And this written by Denny O'Neil, and interior art was by Neal Adams and Dick Giordino. The Batgirl story was Midnight Doom Boy, again guest starring Jason Bard, and that was again by Frank Robbins, Gil Kane and Frank Giacoia, or Giacoia, sorry, mispronounced today. And yes, again another letters page, Mike W. Barr, Alan Brenner and Martin Pasco had letters in the letter page. We're coming to the end now, you'll be glad to know. We have 2 more issues. Number 405, November. Again, Neal Adams, Gaspar Saladino. And this issue, as you can see, it says League of the Assassins, but they titled it First of the Assassins by Denny O'Neil, art by Bob Brown and Frank Giacoia. This was the first named appearance of the League of Assassins, but they actually appeared first in Strange Adventures number 215 from December 1968 in a story with Deadman, one of my favourite. And in the cover story here, Batman uncharacteristically uses a gun as a last resort, but not aimed at people. You'll be glad to hear. The Batgirl story was The Living Statue, again with Jason Boggs guest starring, and the writer was Frank Robbins, and again the art was by Gil Kane and Frank Giacoia. There was also an older story in this issue from Gangbusters number 62, March 1958. The writer was unknown, but the art was by Bob Brown. And a little trivia on him. The artist for this issue was he had the art for this story. Sorry about that, couldn't read my own writing. What I was trying to say was Bob Brown did the main art in the main story in this issue. But he started. If I had a bloopers page, I'd put that in it, but because I'm not very good at editing, what I was trying to say, Bob Brown did the main story art for this issue. He also did the art for that story I spoke about in Gangbusters number 62. He did his first art was for DC in Action Comics number 153 in February 1951, and he did a vigilante story in that issue. He is also named as the co-creator of both the Space Ranger and Talia al Ghul. I did say co-creators. And then last but not least, number 406, December cover date, and this cover was done by Neil Adams. It's called Your Servant of Death, Dr. Dark, Dark spelt with 2 R's. Written by Denny O'Neil, art by Bob Brown and Frank Giacoia. And this is his first appearance of Dr. Dark. Batgirl's story was The Explosive Circle, written by Frank Robbins and art by Gil Kane and Vince Coletta. Sorry about the cock up at the end of that, but if you would like to subscribe, possibly not now after all that, I would like to get to 100 subs because it has a nice ring to it. Thank you for watching, hopefully to the end. And as I've said, written down here, leave a comment, good, bad or indifferent. Put my teeth in. Be great to hear from you. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Hopefully not as a bigger cock up as this one. Thank you. Bye.